If you want nightmares, you are in the right place.
I couldn't sleep last night after listening.
This podcast is genuinely scary.
That's what people are saying about Frightful. And if you'd like a few nightmares of your own, then how about you step this way? Hi, I'm Peter Laws, and I'm an author, journalist, and the host of Frightful, the podcast that is giving folks the serious creeps. From spine-tingling tales of the paranormal and shocking true crime to disturbing cults, possessions, and the forgotten horrors of history, Frightful is the podcast that pulls you into the darkness with immersive music, sound effects, and storytelling that is designed with one thing in mind: to get under your skin. With new episodes every other Sunday, you'll have plenty to keep that heart rate high. The good news is it's available free wherever you get your podcasts. The bad news is that after listening to this show, you might just have to spend a few more cents on electricity. After all, you're going to be sleeping with the lights on. So search Frightful in your podcast apps, and I will see you there in the dark.
You're listening to True Crime Feed. Welcome to True Crime Feed. I'm your host, Angela Ferrari, reviewing the best true crime podcast from the past decade with a teensy bit of humor, plus my top 3 true crime picks of the week. Today on the docket, a show from the archives I think you will really enjoy. Let's discuss the case for the polygamist and the biofuel baron from American Greed. And this isn't just another story about an obscure fundamentalist Latter-day Church of Christ cult. And it's not just about massive tax fraud in the dark underworld of the biofuel business. At its core, this is a love story. A love story that threatens the order of the order itself. Trust me, it'll make sense soon. And to take your listening experience to the next level, go to thetruecrimefeed.com and sign up for my newsletter where I curate visual aids to accompany the show. Here you will see photos of key players from this case, including a black market biofuel baron known as the Lion. I discovered this story on the podcast American Greed, a long-running CNBC series narrated by the legendary Walter Stacy Keach Jr., better known simply as Stacy Keach. Male Stacy has a long, storied acting career, both on stage and film. He's been in American History X, The Borden Legacy, and even a couple of Cheech and Chong movies. A laundry list of credits and bona fides to his name. Plus, he's an excellent storyteller. With all that being said, I can't help but feel like when he's narrating this show, he's also simultaneously sucking on a piece of ham. I know. Who am I to come for legendary Stacy Keach? But I challenge you to play just 15 seconds of audio and you won't be able to unhear it. It's like Stacy took a slice of ham and has it resting on his tongue, sucking on it like a savory lozenge while he's talking. So if you can get past the ham-sucking narration, American Greed has highlighted several compelling true crime cases over the years. This case I've continued to follow and agonize over. The more I try to contain all these moving parts, the more uncomfortable this whole thing gets. Like wearing a tube top. Seriously, I'm not even sure how to squeeze it all into a cohesive story. So let's break it down into 3 chapters. Chapter 1. The Polygamist Cult. The Latter-day Church of Christ, also known as the Davis County Cooperative, also commonly referred to as the Kingston Clan, also known as the Order. This cult has more names than Sean Puffy Daddy P. Diddy Combs. They are a fundamentalist branch of the Mormon Church that broke off on its own in 1935, led by Charles W. Kingston, who claimed to be a direct descendant of Jesus. Oh, and he also believed very strongly in plural marriages. Sounds kind of familiar, right? Most of you true crime aficionados have heard all about the FLDS Church and the whole disgusting Warren Jeffs saga detailed in documentaries like Keep Sweet and Obey and Prophet's Prey. Well, the Kingston clan, aka the Order, is lesser known but just as sick. They don't have the same FLDS dress code with that poofy hair and the long braid and the floor-length prairie dresses. At least today, there's a lot more wiggle room when it comes to their clothing options, even though they actually did start out with a bizarre dress code of their own, wearing all blue modest clothing with no pockets and no shoes. It'd be one thing if you were rocking no shoes on the beaches of Cabo, but this is rough terrain Utah. So the Order ditched this dress code decades ago, and now they have the freedom to wear whatever they desire. However, they don't have a whole lot of choice when it comes to selecting a spouse. You see, in addition to their staunch belief in polygamy, the Order believes in maintaining their pure Kingston bloodline, resulting in many incestuous marriages between cousins, half-siblings, or uncles marrying nieces. And side note, founder Charles W. Kingston also had a few other bizarre quirks. After his favorite wife died, he dug up her body and cut off one of her fingers and started carrying it around with him. You know, for good luck. The group settled in Bountiful, Utah. Leadership was passed on from Father Charles W. to son Eldon Kingston to his brother John Ortell Kingston, who ran it from the late 40s until his death in 87. Leaders encouraged the voluntary consecration of wealth, i.e., followers, you gotta give all your earnings to the Order Bank, where the heads of the Order distribute the money however they see fit. Men in the Kingston Order are ranked by number. High-ranking numbered men have the most status and power, gained through maintaining a pure bloodline and producing children. Why did the Order want so many kids, and why did they want to collect so much money? To build God's army, of course. At least that's what the lower ranks were told they were working so hard for. Under John Ortell Kingston's tutelage, the Davis County Cooperative Society became a legally recognized church, and the Order grew in both members and wealth. The multiple wives and free labor really helped in that effort. And over the years, the Kingston Order developed quite the diverse portfolio, both in land and business assets. Everything from dairy farms, a coal mine, grocery and restaurant supply stores, laundromats, a casino, and security and firearms businesses. Each its own multi-million-dollar organization. In the 90s, under the leadership of Paul Eldon Kingston, the group really leveled up. Men in the Order were encouraged to be college-educated and develop their business acumen. Unlike Warren Jeffs and the FLDS members who lived on their own compound away from society, members of the Kingston Order do their best to blend in, living in the suburbs of Salt Lake City. They dress like ordinary folks and work regular jobs while carefully concealing their illegal practices behind the scenes. Followers adhere to a strict diet, low salt and low sugar, and practice natural remedies, avoiding having to go to doctors outside of the church at all costs. A numbered man will choose his main wife to live in the house with him, while his other wives live in separate homes, appearing to be single moms to the outsiders. They don't even tell their own children who their father is until they are old enough to be trusted to keep the Order's secrecy. And through these practices, the Kingston Order has worked its way up to secretly become the most powerful polygamous group in America, with over 3,500 practicing members, amassing hundreds of millions of dollars for God's army. Fast forward to the 2010s, the Order continues to be run by Paul Kingston, along with 7 other brothers. There's also a rising young star named Jacob. Any guesses what his last name is? Ding, 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 that's right, Kingston. Jacob Kingston is number 95 in the Order, and grandson of one of the OG founders, which again means they believe his bloodline ties him directly to Jesus. Essentially, this guy is treated like royalty amongst the Kingston clan. Jacob gets his degree in mechanical engineering, marries 3 wives, at least one of which is his first cousin, and he fathers approximately 20 kids, give or take. And on one fateful day, darling Jacob Kingston pitches an exciting new business venture to the order. Which brings us to Chapter 2, Betting on Biofuel. Jacob Kingston enlists the help of one of his brothers. He does have close to 100, by the way. He selects brother Isaiah, plus his favorite wife, Sally, plus his mother, Rachel, and together they launch a startup called Washakie Renewable Energy. Funded by the Order, they build this massive refinement facility out in Plymouth, Utah, about 90 miles north of Salt Lake City. Here, they will take used cooking fryer oil from restaurants and convert it into biofuel, then sell it for profit. Sweet. Plus, bonus, each gallon they convert will yield them $2 in tax credits. Double sweet. A lucrative business, plus it's great for the environment? Sounds amazing, right? Only problem is, the refinement plant is in the middle of nowhere. Miles away from all of these restaurants where they collect the fryer oil, and miles away from future biofuel buyers. And the process requires trucks. Heavily loaded, running on fossil fuel trucks, driving back and forth to the plant. It's a dumb business model, and Washakie Renewable is hemorrhaging money. Then things get worse. At one point, they produced a batch of biofuel that wasn't considered pure enough to qualify for the tax credit, plus they were having trouble finding a buyer for their low-grade fuel batch. That's when Jacob Kingston crosses paths with Armenian immigrant turned petroleum magnate / mob boss Levon Termenzian, aka Lev Aslan Dermot, aka The Lion. That's when Washakie Renewable Energy's luck turned around. See? I knew Charles W. Kingston's dead wife's finger would come in handy one of these days. Alright, so how do I describe Lev Aslan Dermot? Picture a giant douche. Homeboy is always dressed like he's going out to a nightclub. Extra gelled up hair, a dumb goatee, gold medallions, all this stuff that probably costs a fortune but looks wicked tacky. I've got some photos of Lev this week in the newsletter, and I swear you can smell the cologne through the picture. Oh, and he's obsessed with lions. He wants people to call him the Lion. He legally changed his name from Levon Tremenzian to Lev Aslan Dermot because Aslan is Turkish for lion. He has huge, expensive lion sculptures and art everywhere. And oh my god, you guys, he started a chain of petrol stations called Noil, which is lion spelled backwards. What a tool! And this is the guy who introduces Jacob Kingston to exciting and innovative ways of committing massive fraud. And technically, Jacob had been dabbling in some minor frauds the past few years leading up to his fated meet-cute with the Lion. The old US government made that process pretty easy in the early days of biofuel incentives. The credits were coming from the IRS and the EPA. Both were stretched pretty thin when it came to regulating the renewables. All a company really had to do was produce documentation showing they converted whatever biomass into fuel. It didn't matter if they actually did the refinement. As long as they had the proper paperwork, they'd get the cash. Government agencies have supposedly cracked down and enforced more regulations, but again, in the early 2010s, fraud in this industry was rampant. Jacob Kingston teamed up with a bunch of other biofuel companies, transferring credits and bilking taxpayers out of millions, all in the name of clean energy. So that's what Jacob was doing when he first met Lev Dermot. But then the Lion shows him how to take it all to the next level. Creating shell companies and paper trails, making it look like Washakie Renewable Energy was doing hundreds of millions in biofuel sales. They would do things like truck barrels filled with either rancid oil, even water, but mislabel the barrels as pure, ready-to-sell biofuel. After trucking them to port, they'd load them on huge barges in the Gulf Coast, check in at Panama, get the paperwork, ship it to the coast of California, and make it look like they were unloading the biofuel to a buyer. It was all a lie. They weren't actually refining discarded oil and converting it into clean biofuel, just erroneously hauling heavy loads of fake fuel on trucks and container ships just for the paperwork. And again, all of this at the expense of taxpayers in the name of clean energy. And now, if you'll excuse me, I have a few handfuls of my own hair I need to pull out. Anyway, Lev and Jacob commence a beautiful bromance together. Lev wines and dines Jacob and his favorite wife, Sally, flying around on the Lion's private jet. Jacob even starts emulating Lev, dressing in fancier suits and getting expensive/equally douchey-looking haircuts. Jacob went from living a life of modesty to living like Mike Tyson. Then, of course, there's the exchanging of gifts. What is custom to get your partner in fraud on your 1-month anniversary anyway? How about a Rolex? And the Lion buys Jacob a $1.6 million Bugatti. Jacob buys the Lion a waterfront mansion in California. At one point, Jacob Kingston is throwing a party at his new $4 million mansion in Cottonwood Heights, Utah. I think one of his 20 kids was having a birthday or something. Anyway, the Lion rolls up in a chrome Lamborghini and hands the keys over to Jacob. Just so bromantic. Meanwhile, the heads of the Kingston clan, they're pumped about the millions coming into the Order's bank, but they don't like that Jacob is living such a showy lifestyle. Up until this point, they've made a concerted effort to keep a low profile, and they want Jacob Kingston to do the same. But he doubles down, showing up courtside at Utah Jazz games. Washakie Renewable Energy was now a major corporate sponsor. They were also making large political contributions to business-friendly Utah lawmakers. The money coming in was crazy. They collected over $500 million just from the U.S. Treasury alone. Jacob and the Lion were living large, but things were about to come crashing down, all because of a forbidden romance. Which brings us to Chapter 3. True love conquers all. Okay, so you may remember I teased a love affair at the top of the show that would change the order. Whose love could possibly have such a powerful effect? The bromance betwixt Lev and Jacob? No. What about the love between American Greed host Stacy Keach and Sliced Ham? That's a good guess, but still not quite powerful enough. The story of star-crossed love that would threaten to take down the entire order begins with a teenage girl named Mary Jacobs. The power of teenage girls, man, I'm telling you, never underestimate them. Okay, so Mary Jacobs grew up in the order. Her father is one of the 7 brothers at the head of the church, a man named David Kingston. Mary Jacobs' mother is David's 5th wife, and also his half-sister. He has 15 children with her, plus more children with his other 17 wives, fathering over 300 kids. Yeah, you heard me. So wrong on so many levels. So that's Mary Jacobs' family. She also happens to be cousins with Jacob Kingston. From an early age, she demonstrated a knack for numbers. So starting at the age of 7, Mary was tasked with organizing files, then eventually working her way up to do accounting and helping prepare taxes for members of the order and their various businesses. At age 17, her parents enrolled her in a local community college to earn her degree in accounting, and they tasked one of her brothers to act as her chaperone. Don't ask me which one, I don't know, because again, she's got 300 siblings. However, despite the near constant supervision, Mary Jacobs still manages to catch the eye of one of her classmates, Brian Nelson. It starts with a few flirty glances, then a little bit of small talk, sharing snacks in study hall, and chatting about their families. It only takes Mary sharing a little bit of information about her family before alarm bells are going off for Brian. Wait, you have how many half-siblings? Brian eventually learns that Mary's father David spent 4 years in prison for incest when he married his 16-year-old niece against her will. Yeah, I know. David and these other numbered men can go jump in a volcano. And Brian Nelson agrees. At this point, the two classmates have fallen for each other, and Brian tells his parents about his love for Mary Jacobs and about her terrible family situation. They agree to help get her out if that's what she wants. At first, Mary is on the fence. Yes, her father is disgusting, and her living situation is awful, but it's all she's ever known. She'd have to leave behind her mother and her beloved little sister forever. It was a decision she was really struggling with until Mary gets caught sending a text message to Brian, and she's placed under strict 24-hour supervision, forced to go without food and water for days, even sleeping in the same bed as her mother to ensure that she would not escape. Mary's father David also informs her that she will be forced to wed her cousin in 2 days, becoming his 5th wife. Mary is panicking. She knows she needs to get out of there immediately. She manages to contact Brian Nelson by sending him an email from a computer at the order bank. Together, they devise a plan. The morning of June 15th, 2013 starts out like any other day. Mary wakes up and asks her little sister to begin cooking breakfast. She'd be right down to help. But instead, Mary waits for the moment she's alone and bolts out of the house. She sprints across the park. 400 yards away, she sees the car. Mary gets into the back seat as the car peels off. She's exhausted, adrenaline coursing through her body. But she made it. Mary Jacobs escaped. The driver of the getaway car is Brian Nelson's father. He brings her to Las Vegas where she can hide out safely with the Nelsons for the next 5 months, away from her family and the clutches of the order. Then, on her 18th birthday, Mary Jacobs was officially an adult and she decided to get married. Not to her cousin, but to her true love, Brian Nelson. Seriously, it's probably one of the most romantic and wholesome Vegas weddings I've ever heard of. Now Mary is a free adult with the support of her husband and his family. So Mary Jacobs decides it's time to take down the order, once and for all. This accounting power couple collects all kinds of data, carefully balancing their ledgers, preparing their case against the Kingstons. Meanwhile, it's now around 2015. The sweet bromance between Jacob Kingston and the Lion is slowly turning bitter. Jacob gets word from the heads of the order that various government officials are sniffing around the books after accusations of welfare fraud have been alleged against members of the Kingston clan. You see, there's a popular credo amongst the Kingstons: bleed the beast, meaning that the evil U.S. government, who finds their wholesome practices of polygamy, incest, underage marriage, exploiting child labor ways of life illegal. So they are the enemy, the beast, and to fight the beast, they need to bleed them dry. Take as much money from the government as possible. So a lot of these wives who appeared to be single mothers would go on welfare and collect checks from the government, even if they were getting an allowance from their husbands. Old Uncle Sam was getting wise to the scheme and looking for more evidence of the Kingstons bleeding the beast. Jacob was getting scared that they might catch on to the shady practices being done at Washakie Renewables. But Lev the Lion reassures him he can use his connections to protect Jacob and the company. All Jacob needs to do is hand over tons of money, and Lev will buy off officials at the IRS and EPA. Oh, and also safeguard his fortune for him in an offshore bank. So while Jacob's swapping pins and routing numbers with the lion, Mary Jacobs returns home to see her mother. She wants to tell her she loves her, but she couldn't live under the confines of the order anymore. Mary offers to help her mother and little sisters escape too. But instead, she is shunned. Her mother blocks all communication with her. It's just so heartbreaking because her mother and so many others are simply victims born into this horrific, inescapable situation. The only way Mary can advocate for them now is by exposing the order. Mary Jacobs and her husband, Brian Nelson, go to the federal government, becoming informants. The feds had been slowly trying to build a case against Washakie Renewable Energy, but they had no idea how widespread this whole thing was. Mary connects all the dots, showing all the companies connected to the order, several which are cash businesses used to launder money, and she points out who ran what, whistleblowing on key Kingston players. A raid was set to take place. All at once, the feds were going to storm the various businesses and collect evidence for their fraud case. But just a few days before the scheduled raid, the order got a tip-off from a mole. Someone on the inside who was sympathetic to their cause warned them to hide and destroy any incriminating evidence. But the raid wasn't a total bust. They did manage to collect some evidence from emails and paperwork kept on file at other companies doing business with Washakie and the Kingstons. On August 23, 2018, Jacob Kingston was arrested at the Salt Lake City airport when trying to board a plane bound for Turkey. His brother Isaiah was also arrested, as well as Lev the Lion Dermott. Jacob and Isaiah agreed to cooperate in exchange for a lesser sentence. At their trial in 2020, they claimed the Lion was the big bad mastermind behind all this fraud. Lev Dermott was sentenced to 40 years for his role in the billion-dollar biofuel scheme. In 2023, Jacob was ordered to pay $500 million in restitution and sentenced to 18 years. His brother Isaiah got 12, his wife Sally got 7, and his ma Rachel got 6. The government is continuing to recover assets from this case. Paul Kingston, the current acting head of the order, distanced himself from the once darling Jacob, claiming he had been acting alone and the order had no idea what was going on and no part of the fraud. But this scandal opened up the floodgates for further legal action. There is currently a pending lawsuit brought forth by 10 plaintiffs accusing the organization of forced child marriage, rape, and incest. As of March 2024, they are still in the process of scheduling proceedings. If you want more information, you could visit the Kingston Order, aka Davis County Cooperative Society official website. Their FAQ page is really quite something. Here you can get the truth about how the media got everything wrong. They are just a marginalized group being discriminated against in a vindictive smear campaign led by a bunch of disturbed teenage girls. So that's one hot take. You could also watch the docuseries on A&E called Escaping Polygamy. This features the story of Amanda Ray Grant and her harrowing escape from the order. I'll warn you though, it is a tough watch. Again, we are dealing with lots of children being born from incest couplings. To top it off, mothers aren't getting the proper medical care they need. Many of these children have health problems, if they even survive at all. One of the most heartbreaking details I came across is how common miscarriages are, and that the wives are often blamed and punished by their husbands if they miscarry. It's awful, just unimaginable what these people have gone through. Justice can't come soon enough. But I want to leave you on a happy note and tell you that Mary Jacobs and Brian Nelson are still happily married and have 2 beautiful sons together. And famed actor and American Greed narrator Stacy Keach has found everlasting love with a beautiful ham and cheese sandwich. To have and to hold the veggies, never shall he part with his honey baked ham. Is it just me, or is anyone else thinking of starting a renewable energy company? Hear me out. We can take all of those discarded fidget spinners that were so on trend a few years ago and now repurpose them into tiny little adorable turbines to generate both wind power and hydroelectricity. And we'll call our company Mini Spinnies. Dude, right? And we can collect all those meaty tax incentives and get matching gold medallions and chromed out Lambos. Yeah! And we definitely won't be making the mistake of having a brilliant teenage girl do Mini Spinnies accounting. I'll be hiring the fine folks at Arthur Anderson LLP because I heard they worked magic for this other energy company. I think they were pronounced Enron or something like that. I don't know, it doesn't matter. Mini Spinnies, you guys. Mini Spinnies. Who's with me? You can email me directly at angela@thetruecrimefeed.com or join the True Crime Feed Facebook discussion group. Keep an open mind and be kind to fellow True Crime Feed friends. Stay tuned till after the break to hear my top 3 podcast power ranking of the week. Hey you. I'm so glad we found each other and get to share our special love for true crime podcasts. I don't ever want you to miss out on a wild story. That would be a crime in itself. So be sure to hit that follow or subscribe button on your podcast app and share your favorite episode with a friend so the next time you see each other, you can splurge about your latest true crime obsession. Thanks for spreading the word, and now back to the show. And we're back. Here are the 3 shows currently trending that I think are worth a listen. I present to you this week's podcast power ranking. At the number 3 spot, we have Varmintown. Here's a reminder from the show page. 2 years ago, Kyle MacLachlan, the star of Twin Peaks, called investigative journalist Joshua Davis with a strange story. Kyle had heard a rumor that Pablo Escobar did a deal in the early 80s with a remote coastal southern town of 300 people. In exchange for vast wealth and limitless cocaine, Escobar would be allowed to land planes and ships in the area. Over the last 24 months, Josh and Kyle investigated the rumor, journeying to Varmintown to knock on doors and find out what really happens when a fire hose of money and cocaine is turned on a small, tight-knit community. This latest episode had such a specific feel to it. You know when you were back in high school hanging out with that one slightly naughty friend that would take you on the occasional trespassing adventure? Well, this latest episode titled Dale Varnum felt like that. You're hanging out in a weird place you're not supposed to be with someone who's equal parts sketchy and hilarious. It's a thrilling ride, and the chemistry between hosts Kyle MacLachlan and Joshua Davis really shines in this latest episode from Varmintown. At the number 2 spot, we have Hello, John Doe. Here's a synopsis from the show page. At age 45, Steve Patterson made a shocking online discovery. His own missing persons page. Desperate to uncover why he had been included on the list, Steve called Todd Matthews, a missing persons investigator, in search of answers. Together, Todd and Steve discover a sordid family past that includes long-lost relatives, kidnappings, and murders. Hello, John Doe is a winding, poignant tale that explores what it means to be lost and found. Yes, I'm as shocked as you to see this down a spot from last week. Episode 5, titled The Fugitives, was all about Michael's biological sister who was kidnapped by his birth mother's psycho boyfriend. I was a few minutes into the episode when I realized, oh, I know this part of the whole sad, miserable story because it was covered in the 2022 Sky Borgman documentary on Netflix titled Girl in the Picture. So if you saw that documentary, you won't hear many new details from this particular episode. If you haven't, be sure to tune in to the latest episode of Hello, John Doe. And at the number 1 spot, we have media pressure. Here's a summary from the show page. It's been 20 years since 21-year-old nursing student Maura Murray disappeared without a trace on February 9th, 2004. Yet countless questions remain, and her family continues to fight for resolution. Her mysterious disappearance is a story that strangers have told hundreds of times. But absent in the story you've heard are the voices of those who knew Maura, those closest to the investigation, but not anymore. I don't know about you, but I've been left feeling so burned by an overwhelming amount of bad, salacious coverage of this case, all resulting in dead ends. So I was resigned not to listen to this show until I heard from friends that I had to check it out. And I am so glad I did, because this is a full-color, detailed portrait of Maura Murray and a real investigation into her disappearance. Maura's sister and host, Julie Murray, is keeping the coverage on the rails. I'm learning new details I've never heard before. Plus, you get to hear from Maura's dad in his beautiful, thick New England accent. I binged the first 6 episodes in 24 hours. It's that good. Even if you thought you knew everything about Maura Murray and her case, trust me, you don't. And you're gonna view this story in a whole new light when you tune in to Media Pressure. Now for my miss of the week. We have the rise and fall of Ruby Frank. Here's a synopsis from the show page. Ruby Frank, a Utah mom turned YouTube momfluencer who amassed 2.6 million subscribers, was known for her strict disciplinarian parenting style. But authorities now say that her, quote, tough love was actually child abuse. Ruby Frank's son escaped from the Utah home of her self-help business partner, Jody Hillenbrandt. The boy was reportedly starved and tied up with duct tape, along with his 10-year-old sister. As law enforcement dug deeper, they uncovered injuries, torture, and emotional harm inflicted by both Frank and Hillenbrandt. From Wondery and Law and Crime go behind the scenes, from Ruby and Jody's path to internet stardom to the investigation that brought them down. I listened to the entire episode 1. It wasn't easy. After researching this week's main story, I was super drained on hearing about stories of child abuse, so that probably didn't help my opinion. I am interested in learning about this case, but from a different source, because as I feared, this is a Wondery show at its worst. Padded, repetitive, bland, tone-deaf reporting. The whole project is giving me the icks. So I'm going to go ahead and hit that unsubscribe button on this Mormon momfluencer story and send the rise and fall of Ruby Frank down my podcast queue trapdoor. Find out next week if Media Pressure will remain in the #1 spot as this series continues, or if another show will take its place. Let me know what trending pods are in your top 3 and what show fell through your podcast queue trapdoor. I'll meet you back here next week to dust off another superb true crime show from the archive for your next feeding fix. That's all for today's True Crime Feed. Don't forget to sign up for my weekly newsletter where I post links to my top 3 favorite shows of the week and bring you fabulous visual aids for every episode. Be sure to follow the show on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook to join the conversation. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review and tell your fellow partners in crime to tune in to True Crime Feed. I want to thank you so much for riding along and allowing me to be your audio accomplice. Join me next week for another feeding.
Magic mirror on the wall, who are the most rotten ones of all? Hello, my darlings, and welcome to Rotten to the Core. Here, we will scry into the past and discover some rotten apples throughout our history. Have no fear, my pretties, for we shall learn a lesson not only about their horrendous deeds, but also about our own power. Let's step out of the shadow of the past and help pull it towards the light. I am your host, Josh Waters, and I'll be the queen guiding you on our journey. Now, come along, dears. We have lessons to learn. History is waiting.